The slap came fast, my son's wife, standing in my kitchen spitting. "You'll get nothing," like I hadn't raised the man she married. Still, I didn't fall. Just reached for the counter, the edge digging into my palm like a truth I hadn't wanted. As the sting bloomed across my face, I caught movement outside. Nina, the neighbor, phone raised, filming. While the air thickened, her words echoed. "Not even your own memories," like erasing me was a favor. The same daughter-in-law who called me Mom now looked at me like furniture left too long. That's when I knew. They weren't taking me down. They were handing me the evidence. "We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from." It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. I was drying my hands when I heard the voice behind me. "Give it to me," Tara said. Flat, final. I turned around slowly. The kitchen light caught the edge of the watch in my palm. Richard's watch. The one he wore every day for 32 years. The face was scratched near the 12, the leather strap softened with age. He used to leave it on the nightstand like a promise. "I'll be back." "No," I said. Tara took a step forward. Her cheeks were flushed, pupils wide. She looked like she hadn't slept. Not just last night. Longer. Something had slipped in her. I saw it, but I didn't move. "You'll get nothing," she hissed. "Not even your own memories." She lunged before I had time to blink. The slap cracked through the room. It sounded bigger than her hand. Time slowed. Not metaphorically. Actually, slowed. I tasted metal and felt the kitchen spin. My hip knocked the drawer handle. I caught myself against the counter, but my lips split on impact. Warm blood slid down my chin. She stood over me, chest heaving. The air between us buzzed, electric with hate. I didn't cry. That felt important. Not for pride, just something else. Something that kept me standing. Out the window, I caught sight of Nina. She was halfway down the garden path, hose dangling in one hand, her other frozen midair. Her phone came up slowly, like a reflex she didn't fully control. Record. Of course she would. This street didn't do privacy, it did footage. "Jesus Christ, Tara!" Eric's voice broke through as he burst into the room. "What are you doing?" But his eyes didn't go to me, they stayed locked on his wife. Like I was wallpaper. Like I wasn't bleeding. Tara didn't flinch. She wiped her hand on her jeans like I was dirt she wanted off her skin. "You're lucky that's all I did," she muttered, already stepping back. I stared at Eric. Waited. Willed him to look at me. His jaw clenched, hands balling at his sides. But he didn't say it. Didn't say, "Are you okay, Mom?" Didn't even look sorry. And that was worse than the slap. I swallowed hard, tasted copper, and straightened. My hand went to the counter, the cold granite grounding me. "You just wrote your own ending," I said softly. I don't know where it came from. It felt like someone else said it through me. But the moment it landed, Tara's face changed. Not fear. Contempt. But something flickered behind her eyes, quick as lightning. She turned her back and walked out like the house disgusted her. Eric followed a beat later. The door slammed. And then it was just me, the ticking of Richard's watch still in my hand, and Nina's silhouette frozen on her porch. My lip throbbed. The silence rang. Then a knock. Not at the front. At the side door. The one no one used but Richard. I blinked. The knock came again. 3 short, 1 long. The same rhythm Richard used when he came home late from the clinic, so I'd know it was him, and not a stranger. I stared at the door, breath stuck in my chest. It knocked again. I didn't open the side door. Not then. Not even to entertain the impossible. I stood still until the knock stopped, until the silence came back, harder than before. The clock over the stove said 7:16. Morning light had shifted to something flatter, duller, like even the sun didn't want to be here. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, straight into Tara waiting in the hallway. She didn't say a word, just pointed at the stairs. I looked at her hand, pale, still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. I didn't move. Then Eric came around the corner, already carrying 2 empty boxes. He didn't look at me. His eyes landed somewhere over my shoulder and he offered them up like they were help. Like this was mercy. "Start packing," Tara said. My mouth was dry. My name's still on the deed. Tara didn't blink. "So's mine." Eric shifted, rubbed the back of his neck. "Maybe it's best if you stay with Nina. For a little while." A little while. I didn't smile, but something in me cracked open. He still couldn't say it plain. Couldn't even look at me now. I felt cold all the way through. "You mean forever?" I asked. Tara gave a short laugh. "Mean. Empty. If forever fits in your suitcase." I walked past them, slow and deliberate, up the stairs. I didn't want to cry in front of them. I wouldn't. That part of me had burned off already. By the time I reached the top landing, Nina was in my bedroom, folding my sweaters with the same care she used to give to her roses in spring. "I saw them leave," she said quietly, not looking up. "Figured you could use a hand." I nodded and sat on the edge of the bed. My knees didn't want to hold me anymore. I opened the top drawer, pulled out a handful of socks, and placed them in the box without thought. Nina reached over to the closet, took down one of Richard's old cardigans, navy, with the suede elbow patches. She folded it gently, set it on top of the rest. Then, barely above a whisper, I recorded it. I stilled. She looked at me finely, eyes soft but sharp. From the garden. I had my phone on. Caught the whole thing. The weight of it pressed against my chest. Not fear, not hope exactly. Just gravity. The kind you feel when something irreversible enters the room. "Keep it safe," I said, my voice low, raw. She nodded once. Nothing else needed saying. We packed in silence for the next hour. Eric never came upstairs. Tara passed the doorway once but didn't step inside. I filled 2 boxes. That's all they'd let me take. And I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, because I knew what was coming. Tara thought she'd won something today, but she hadn't played this game long enough. I had. In the bottom of the second box, under scarves and photo frames, I tucked away the worn leather folder Richard used to keep in his study. Tara had missed it when she bulldozed through his papers last fall, but I hadn't. It held more than she knew. As I closed the flap, Nina looked up. "Where will you go?" she asked. "I'll figure it out." "You could stay with me a few days," she said. "Just till you get your feet under you. I don't want to be a burden." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Neither do I." That made me laugh, small, bitter. We were both tired women who knew what it meant to be replaced in our own homes. The sun was starting to sink by the time we brought the boxes down. Tara stood by the door, arms crossed. Eric lingered behind her like a shadow that didn't know which way to lean. I didn't look at either of them. Outside, Nina's car sat in the driveway, trunk already open. As we loaded the last box, Tara leaned against the doorway. "Don't forget your pills," she called, fake sweet. "I'd hate for you to confuse your delusions with reality." I turned just once. "I'll be seeing you." Not a threat, just a fact. Nina drove slow down the street, but I didn't look back. My hands were clenched in my lap, and in my coat pocket I felt the edge of the flash drive she'd slipped me on the way out. It held the recording, the slap, the moment it all changed. I watched the houses pass, light flickering behind blinds, and I realized something. They had made me small in my own life, but not for much longer. The hum of the mini fridge was the only sound in the room. That, and the faint rattle of the air conditioner pushing out tired, lukewarm air. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, still in the same clothes I'd left the house in. The collar of my blouse was wrinkled. A faint smell of lemon cleaner hung in the air, the kind that tries too hard to smell like something it isn't. The bruise had started to bloom across my cheek, slow and deliberate, a storm in slow motion. It had gone from pink to violet since morning. I pressed a tissue against it and watched my reflection in the mirror above the desk. My face looked older than I remembered. Not from years, from hours. I traced the outline of the bruise, then dropped my hand. The silence was too loud. I opened my purse and took out the watch. Richard's watch. I set it on the nightstand beside the motel Bible and stared at it like it might tick out a plan. The second hand moved steady as always. Dependable. Rational. Nothing like the world outside its glass. My mind kept pulling backward. To Eric as a boy. 6 years old. His hair sticking up in the back, chasing bubbles across the backyard while Richard laughed and tried to film on the old camcorder. I could still hear that laughter if I closed my eyes. Then him at 16, slamming the car door after his first heartbreak, muttering that no one ever really stays. I'd told him that wasn't true, that when people love you, they don't leave. Now I wasn't so sure I'd ever told him the truth. I blinked hard, trying to push the memories out before they drowned me. Tara's words replayed in my head, sharp and cold. You'll get nothing, not even your own memories. She'd meant it as cruelty, but she didn't understand what she'd given me. Clarity. The phone buzzed on the table. A text from Eric. Stay away from the house. We're meeting the lawyer tomorrow. I read it twice. Then again. My thumb hovered over the screen. You mean my lawyer? The 3 dots pulsed for a moment, then disappeared. No reply. I set the phone down gently, as if not to startle the air. The ache behind my eyes deepened, that familiar sting of being erased by the people you built your life around. Outside, through the thin curtains, I could see the neon sign flicker. Lakeview Inn, though the lake was long gone, paved over for condos years ago. Cars hissed by on the highway. A couple argued 2 rooms down. The whole place smelled faintly of cigarettes and lost time. I walked to the sink, ran the water until it came warm, then pressed the washcloth to my cheek. The sting grounded me, made the world come back into focus. I caught my reflection again. The bruise, the split lip, the tired eyes. But behind all that, something else. Something steadier. I whispered, to no one. Not yet. The words surprised me. They sounded like a decision. I went back to the bed, sat down, and reached for the flash drive Nina had given me. The tiny metal thing looked insignificant, but it was heavier than it should have been. It carried the truth, whether anyone wanted to see it or not. I tucked it into the inside pocket of my coat, close to my chest. My pulse thudded against it. They wanted me small, invisible, quiet, fine. Let them think I was broken. Let them underestimate me one more time. I turned off the lamp. The room fell into darkness except for the orange glow leaking through the curtains. My eyes adjusted slowly. I could still see the faint shimmer of the watch face beside the Bible, marking time like a heartbeat. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed and faded into the distance, and for the first time in days, I smiled. Small, deliberate, because I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The next morning, I checked out of the motel before sunrise. The desk clerk barely looked up. That suited me fine. By 8 a.m., I was sitting in the corner booth of a diner 3 towns over, stirring cold coffee and watching the front door. The only other customer was an older man reading the classifieds like he still believed jobs came from newsprint. At exactly 8:13, a woman walked in. Black blazer, hair in a tight twist, lipstick the color of dried blood. She spotted me instantly, like she'd known what kind of face to expect. "Ava Price," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. No handshake, no smile. "I appreciate you coming," I said. She set her phone on the table and raised an eyebrow. "Nina didn't say much, just that you needed discretion. And teeth." I nodded. "I need both." She reached into her bag, pulled out a tablet, and tapped it to life. "Start from the beginning, but make it count. I don't waste time on slow burners unless there's fire underneath." So I told her, in plain, steady words, the slap, the bruises, the boxes. Eric's silence, the house I'd paid for, the watch. The voice memo Nina had already sent her in advance. I told her everything except how it felt to be erased by your own blood. When I finished, Ava's jaw had tightened. Not emotionally, professionally, like a mechanic hearing the familiar grind of an engine that's about to seize. "You have a credible witness," she said, "and video documentation. That's not just assault. That's inheritance coercion, clean and prosecutable." "I don't want jail," I said. "Not yet." She narrowed her eyes. "Then what do you want?" "To watch them build their little castle on top of a lie, and then pull one brick." A slow smile tugged at her lips. "You want to let them dig the hole themselves. I want to hand them the shovel." Ava leaned forward, elbows on the formica. "Then we do nothing. Not yet. We let them meet the lawyer. Make their demands. Put it on paper. The second they move from cruelty to fraud, we strike." I sat back, exhaling for what felt like the first time in days. "They'll hang themselves," I said, "with their own arrogance." Ava grinned. "God, I love clients like you." Her phone buzzed. A notification lit the screen. "That your friend Nina?" I nodded. "She's transferring the original video file now. Secure cloud, encrypted, multiple backups." "Smart," Ava muttered, already opening her email. "The moment we need it, we file. Not just civil. We go after the asset trail, the title split, even the power of attorney if it's been manipulated." "They think I'm still grieving," I said quietly. "Still licking wounds." Ava looked up. "Use that. Let them keep underestimating you. The law isn't emotional. It just waits for the right moment to bite." She slid a small black folder across the table. Inside, forms, authorizations, a letter of representation already typed with my name. "Sign these. From here on out, they'll think they're talking to your lawyer," she said. "But they'll be talking to your shadow." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. We shook once, briefly. She left as abruptly as she arrived. Back in the car. Parked beside the rusting gas station, I opened the folder again and stared at my signature. It looked different somehow. Firmer, older. Like it belonged to someone who'd been through fire and come out sharpened. I texted Nina one word. "Delivered." She replied a minute later. "They won't see you coming." I smiled. Let them sit in that house, drawing up plans to erase me. Let them think the bruises were the end of the story. They had no idea what I'd kept from Richard's files, or how much of that house they didn't actually own. The next move wasn't mine. It was theirs. And I'd be waiting. 3 days later, I was back in Ava's office, a high-rise in downtown Greensboro, all glass and edges. The kind of place that smelled like success and disinfectant. A steady hum from the air vent filled the room, a sound too clean to be natural. Ava stood by the window, phone tucked between shoulder and ear, flipping through a folder so thick it looked like a Bible rewritten in legalese. I could tell by the way her expression changed that whatever she was hearing wasn't good. She hung up, exhaled through her nose, and turned to me. "You weren't exaggerating." I rarely do, I said. What did you find? She dropped the folder on the desk, papers spilling like a shuffle of bad hands. Your daughter-in-law's smarter than she looks, but not by much. She left a trail. I leaned forward. What kind of trail? Ava flipped open a statement, ran a manicured nail down the column of transactions. 6 months ago, right after you were admitted for that fall, the one at the grocery store, someone initiated 3 electronic transfers from your savings account to a new joint account. Roughly $28,000 total. My stomach went cold. I never opened a joint account. I know, Tara did. Ava's tone was clinical, controlled. And get this, your son signed as the witness on the authorization form. For a moment, the room tilted. The air felt thinner. Eric's name, in blue ink. I could almost picture his handwriting. Careful, slightly leaning to the right. My throat tightened. They've been planning this since the funeral, I said, my voice barely more than air. Ava nodded. Looks like they started with money. The rest was just cleanup. Moving you out, consolidating the estate, rewriting the narrative before anyone noticed. The clock on her wall ticked once, twice. Each second felt louder than the last. Can we prove it? I asked. Absolutely. The timestamps alone are gold. I've already pulled the IP logs from the bank's portal. The login originated from their home Wi-Fi. Ava gave a sharp smile. They made it too easy. I pressed my palms together, fingers trembling only slightly. So what now? Ava began pacing, her heels striking sharp notes against the polished floor. We'll need 3 things: timing, proof, and public exposure. The first 2 we have. The third. She stopped, met my eyes. That's where you come in. I thought about it for a long moment. The taste of metal returned to my mouth, same as the day she hit me. Tara, standing over me, certain I was finished. They gave us the first 2, I said quietly. I'll deliver the third. Ava tilted her head, assessing me. You're not as fragile as you look, Margaret. I smiled faintly. I raised a thief. I can bury one too. For the first time, Ava laughed, low and genuine. Good, because if we play this right, she'll hang herself with paperwork. We spent the next hour building the skeleton of our counterattack. Ava outlined the chain of evidence, the bank statements, the notarized forms, the email confirmations tied to Tara's address. Nina's recording was just the opening act. This was the showstopper. When I signed the affidavit, Ava placed it in a sealed envelope and handed it to me. Keep this somewhere safe, she said. Not in your car, not in your motel. Somewhere no one will think to look. I nodded. I know just the place. Outside, the city buzzed with lunch hour noise, horns, footsteps, laughter that sounded too easy. I walked 2 blocks to a quiet park and sat on a bench beneath the maples. The air smelled of wet earth and cut grass. Across the street, people went on with their lives, blissfully unaware of how easily families can devour each other. I looked down at the folder in my lap, then at my reflection in its glossy cover. The bruise had faded to yellow now, the last ghost of what started it all. In the distance, my phone vibrated. A new message from an unknown number. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Settlement meeting. Bring your lawyer. No name, but I didn't need one. I stared at the screen until my reflection blurred against it. Then I whispered, steady and certain. Let's begin. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes as I stepped out of Nina's car and walked toward the house I used to call mine. I'd worn soft blue, the kind of cardigan people associate with peace. A calming presence. I'd curled my hair like I used to for Sunday services. I even brought muffins, store-bought, still warm in the plastic. Optics mattered. The front door opened before I could knock. Tara stood there surprised but smiling, like the queen of some poorly staged theater production. "Margaret," she said, drawing my name out like it tasted strange. "Didn't expect you so early?" I smiled like forgiveness. "Let's just sort things out." Eric appeared behind her, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He looked like a boy again, unshaven, disoriented, a man not entirely sure which side he'd chosen. "Hey, Mom." He didn't sound confident saying it. "Hello, sweetheart," I said, and I meant the sweetness, not for him. For the wire hidden in the lining of my handbag, live and blinking, recording every sound in the room. Ava's team had embedded it in the zipper seam, paired to my phone and backed up to 3 separate clouds. The plan was simple. Let them be themselves. Tara led me into the kitchen like we hadn't stood here days ago with blood on my lip. "Coffee?" she offered, falsely cheerful. "Or tea? We've still got that lemon ginger you like." "That would be lovely," I said, folding my hands over my purse on the table. "It's good to sit here again. I've missed normalcy." Eric sat across from me, still unsure if he should speak. "You know," I said lightly, "things got out of hand. All of us. Tempers, grief, misunderstanding." Tara made a tisking sound as she poured water into the kettle. "We've all been through a lot, haven't we? It's not easy losing Richard. For any of us." I nodded, playing the part. "We just need to be honest. Calm. Settle things fairly." She turned, one hand on her hip. "That's all I've ever wanted." The lie hung between us, thick as steam from the kettle. I didn't blink. Eric shifted. "Maybe we overreacted," he said. "I mean, throwing you out like that. It wasn't right. But we thought you weren't well." I kept my expression soft. "It's all right, darling. It's a complicated time." Tara snorted. It wasn't complicated. She wanted to keep everything, the house, the accounts. Like Eric never existed. Like Richard didn't have a family beyond her. The words came fast, sharp, unguarded. Eric looked uncomfortable but didn't correct her. He just glanced at me, almost apologetic. I tilted my head gently. "That's not how I remember it." Tara leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Well, your memory's been off lately, hasn't it?" There it was, on tape. I took a sip of tea and gave her the calmest smile I could find. "Maybe, but I remember one thing clearly. This house was built on love and trust. That's what makes betrayal so inconvenient." Tara rolled her eyes. "God, is this a monologue?" Eric chuckled under his breath, and just like that, the mask fell for both of them. Tara moved closer to him, hand brushing his shoulder. "She's playing the victim again. She always does this. Spins it like she's the saint and we're the villains. You saw how she looked at you during the slap. Like she wanted it." It took everything in me not to flinch. Instead, I stood, slow and smooth, brushing non-existent crumbs from my lap. "Well," I said cheerfully, "thank you both." Tara blinked. "For what?" I picked up my bag, carefully zipping it closed, for the tea, for the clarity, and for confirming exactly what I needed. Eric stood up. "Wait, what?" I kissed his cheek. He didn't move. "Goodbye, darling. I'll see you tomorrow. With my lawyer." Tara's mouth opened, but I was already walking toward the door, coat slung over one arm, the morning sun warming my face as I stepped outside. The bag buzzed once in my hand. Recording complete. I smiled at the sky, then at Nina's car waiting across the street. Let them tidy up the kitchen. They had no idea what was coming. By 10:07 a.m., Ava had filed the paperwork, restraining orders, emergency injunctions, a freeze on the estate account. Every motion stamped, filed, and delivered with ruthless efficiency. Her office ran like a courtroom war machine, paralegals moving with purpose, printers firing like pistols. They won't know what hit them, Ava said, slipping the final stack of motions into a courier bag. This goes out now. Outside her window, the city sparkled in that cold November way, bright, but distant. I didn't smile. I just nodded once. That was all it took. At 11:12 a.m., Tara woke to her banking app screaming in red. Access denied. Account frozen. See legal notice. She tapped and scrolled and cursed, but every transaction now echoed back one word: blocked. Eric came downstairs in boxers and a t-shirt, rubbing his face. Why is the mortgage account locked? Tara threw her phone across the table. Ask your mother. An hour later, my phone rang. Eric's name flashed on screen. I didn't answer at first, just let it buzz in my palm while I watched the winter sun tilt through Nina's kitchen blinds. When I finally picked up, his voice hit like thunder. What the hell did you do? I kept my tone even. Good morning, Eric. Don't start with that crap. You're ruining us. I let the silence stretch long enough for the word to echo in his own ears. No, I said. I'm saving what's mine. You're blowing up the whole family over some money? 28,000, taken behind my back, forged signatures, a fake account. That's not some money, Eric. That's theft. I signed because Tara said, exactly. He stopped. The air in the call felt suddenly smaller. You chose her, I said quietly. Over me. Over the truth. And now the truth has teeth. I hung up before he could answer. By mid-afternoon, the courier had reached Tara's doorstep. Restraining order, civil summons, and an official motion to halt estate disbursement, all signed, sealed, and served. Nina and I watched from the window as the man handed over the envelope. Tara didn't even open it at first, just stared at it like it might explode. Later, I stepped outside to sweep leaves off Nina's porch. Not for show, just for the motion of it, the rhythm. Something to keep my hands from shaking. That's when the car skidded up. Tara stepped out like a woman possessed. No makeup, hoodie, jaw clenched so tight I could hear it crack from 20 feet away. Her eyes locked on Nina's front door. She didn't see me at first. She pounded once, twice, then yelled, Nina, we need to talk. Nina opened the door slowly, arms crossed. She didn't flinch. I know what you're doing, Tara hissed, and you're going to stop. Delete the video. Whatever your little plan is, it ends now. Nina raised an eyebrow, calm as Sunday Mass. You're too late. It's already been sent to 3 lawyers and 1 journalist. Tara blinked, just once. A full second passed before her mouth opened. You... what? I'm not bluffing, Nina said, stepping forward, voice low and precise. Your voice, your words, your slap. All of it. Copied. Backed up. Distributed. You can't... I did. Tara looked like she'd been slapped again. Her face crumpled at the edges, not quite breaking, but close. The fury behind her eyes dimmed just slightly. Something else was there now. Fear. I will sue you for this, she snapped, voice shaking. Nina didn't move. You'll need a different lawyer. Yours just got served. From the porch steps, I finally spoke. Go home, Tara. She turned, startled. Like she hadn't realized I'd been watching the whole time. I told you I'd see you again, I said. I didn't say when. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She stood there a second longer, fists clenched, chest rising and falling too fast, then stormed back to her car, tires screaming as she pulled away. I swept another pile of brittle red leaves into the bin. Nina stood beside me, not saying a word. In the silence, I realized something. Tara had finally lost her footing, but people like her don't fall quietly. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and nerves. Even the benches seemed to breathe. the kind of shallow, careful breathing people do when they're afraid to make noise. Ava leaned over my shoulder, whispering something about docket order, but I couldn't take my eyes off Tara across the aisle. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair pulled tight, skin pale against the navy suit that wasn't hers. Eric sat 2 rows behind her, hunched, one knee bouncing in restless rhythm. He hadn't looked at me once. Case 2314A2. The bailiff called. Henderson versus Henderson. Every sound after that felt magnified. The shuffle of papers, the judge's gavel, my own pulse. Tara stood when asked, voice smooth and rehearsed. Your Honor, this was a misunderstanding. An emotional conversation that's been exaggerated. I never assaulted anyone. Certainly not my sister-in-law. Her lawyer, a silver-haired man with a drawl built for persuasion, nodded gravely. The defense maintains this was a heated discussion taken out of context. No intent, no malice, and crucially, no evidence of physical harm. Ava rose slowly, her posture a deliberate contrast. Then perhaps, she said, turning toward the screen the clerk was queuing up, we can play Exhibit A. The judge gave a curt nod. The screen flickered to life. A moment of static. Then, Nina's porch, crisp in morning light. Tara's face twisted with fury, voice sharp enough to slice glass. You'll get nothing, she screamed. The slap came next. Audible, unmistakable. Gasps fluttered through the gallery. One woman's hand flew to her chest. Even the judge's expression cracked, just slightly. Tara's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, we'd like to object to... Overruled, the judge said, eyes still fixed on the screen. Eric buried his face in his hands. I could almost feel his shame radiating across the room like heat off asphalt. I sat perfectly still. My hands clasped tight in my lap. My heart didn't race. It held steady, deliberate, like it finally recognized its own rhythm again. The video ended on Tara's threat, her voice echoing into the courtroom air. Silence, heavy, unrelenting silence. Then the judge spoke. Ms. Henderson, would you care to clarify your previous statement regarding assault? Tara's lips parted, but no sound came. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but she just stared at the screen frozen on her own face, eyes wild, hand mid-swing. It's been edited, she said finally, voice trembling. Nina, she's manipulative. You can't trust... Ava's tone stayed measured. The original file has been verified by digital forensics. Chain of custody confirmed. Timestamp, metadata, everything intact. Tara's jaw tightened. This is harassment. No, Ava replied, her gaze steady. This is evidence. The judge's gavel came down once, the sound sharp as a gunshot. Enough. We'll recess for 20 minutes before proceeding with testimony. Everyone rose. Chairs scraped the floor. Murmurs buzzed low like hornets. Tara turned sharply toward Eric, hissing something under her breath. He didn't respond. He just stood, pale, shoulders slumped, eyes fixed on the floor. When she reached to grab his arm, he pulled away. That tiny motion, a flicker of defiance, seemed to deflate her completely. I stayed seated, letting the crowd thin before I stood. Ava gathered her notes, efficient as ever, but her voice softened when she spoke. You okay? I nodded once. Better than I've been in months. She smiled faintly. You did what you had to. As she walked off toward the clerk's table, I sank back into the bench for a moment. The echoes of the video still hung in the air. The sound of Tara's slap, the tremor in my own voice when I'd spoken that day. Humiliation? Yes. But beneath it, something else took root. Satisfaction. Because for the first time, the truth wasn't just mine. It was undeniable. Recorded, witnessed, real. Across the aisle, Tara sat rigid, whispering furiously to her lawyer. Her eyes flicked toward me once, a glare meant to wound. But behind it, I caught something rawer. Panic. And then, as the bailiff announced the recess ending, Ava returned, whispering low. They just filed a new motion. Tara's side wants to strike the financial claim, but there's something strange in their paperwork. I looked up sharply. Strange how? Ava's eyes narrowed. There's a second signature on one of the withdrawals. Not Tara's. Not yours. The gavel cracked again. Court is back in session. When we returned from recess, the room had changed temperature. The air felt thinner, charged. Even the judge's robe seemed to hang heavier. Ava set a slim flash drive on the table like it was a detonator. Tara's attorney noticed first. What is that? An addendum to our evidence list, Ava said, her tone polite but edged. Your Honor, we've obtained corroborating proof relevant to the financial dispute. We request permission to introduce it before proceeding. The judge adjusted her glasses. Proceed. Ava clicked her laptop, and the courtroom monitors came alive again, blue light cutting across every face. I already knew what it was. I'd known since the night I'd left my mother's old nursing bag at the Henderson house with the tiny body camera tucked inside the lining. At the time, I didn't know if it would catch anything, but it had. The feed began grainy, angled from waist height. The sound came first, a soft shuffle of slippers on tile, the low hum of afternoon TV. Then Tara's voice. She was old, it was easy, she said, laughing. She didn't even know what half those accounts were. A chill swept the room. Someone gasped softly behind me. Eric. On the screen, Tara's image came into focus. She leaned over the kitchen counter, counting folded checks, wine glass beside her elbow. Eric signed where I told him. It's not like his mother ever noticed anything missing. She'll be gone soon anyway. The words landed like hammer blows. The judge straightened, hands clasped tight. Play that again, she said quietly. Ava did. She was old. It was easy. Eric's chair scraped the floor as he shot to his feet. You recorded me too? He shouted, voice raw, breaking somewhere between rage and disbelief. The judge slammed her gavel. Mr. Henderson, you will sit down. But Eric didn't move. His eyes darted between Tara and the screen, as if he could erase what he'd just heard by staring hard enough. You told me it was a transfer for hospice care, he said, voice shaking. You told me she approved it. Tara's lawyer tried to intervene, but she spun on Eric like a cornered animal. Don't you dare turn this on me. You signed it, remember? I signed what you told me to, he yelled. Every head turned. The gallery, the reporters, even the bailiff. No one breathed. I felt something inside me shift. Not triumph, not even relief, but release. The judge's voice came low, deliberate. Mrs. Sloane, she said, turning toward me, is this recording authentic? I met her eyes. Yes, Your Honor. Taken the same week the withdrawals occurred, time-stamped, backed up, and verified by the same forensic expert who reviewed the first video. Tara's lawyer stood, flustered. Your Honor, we haven't had time to review. You'll have it in discovery, Ava said, already handing over a certified transcript. But the statement you just heard is self-authenticating. Ms. Henderson admits to misappropriation. The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable but resolute. Then there is no financial ambiguity. The estate freeze stands. The civil claim proceeds. A single cough echoed from the back of the room. Otherwise, silence. Tara's empire of control, the polished lies she'd built brick by brick, collapsed right there, quietly, almost politely. Her lawyer sank back into his chair. Eric lowered his head, hands clasped together as if in prayer. Tara didn't cry. She just stared ahead, unblinking. Her lips moved once, soundless, like she was trying to summon an explanation that no longer existed. Ava began packing her briefcase, crisp motions betraying the adrenaline beneath. "That's it," she whispered to me. "That's the nail." But as the bailiff called for adjournment, I noticed something strange. Tara's eyes weren't on me anymore. They'd shifted to Eric, watching him, studying him. And then, barely perceptible, she smiled. A smile without warmth, without fear. The kind of smile that said, "You're not done with me yet." Outside, cameras flashed through the hallway glass, reporters shouting questions. But her words from the porch came back to me. "You'll get nothing." Only now I wondered if she hadn't meant money at all. Maybe she'd meant peace. The courtroom felt colder the next morning. No crowd this time. No cameras pressed against the glass, just the sound of the heating vents and the hollow shuffle of chairs being drawn across polished wood. Tara stood between her attorney and the defense table, the color drained from her face. She'd traded her navy suit for something softer, gray and shapeless, like a person already halfway to surrender. Eric sat behind her again, but farther this time, 3 rows back, alone. Judge Harlan entered without fanfare. No one rose until the bailiff barked it. When she took her seat, she didn't look at the defense first. She looked at me, then at Ava, then at Tara. "Ms. Henderson," she began, her voice even, deliberate. "This court finds you guilty of assault, financial fraud, and elder intimidation." The words struck like stones dropped in still water. Each one rippled outward, through Tara's trembling hands, through the tight muscles in Eric's jaw, through the quiet in my chest. Tara shook her head slowly, whispering something to herself. Her lawyer touched her arm, but she jerked away. "No," she muttered, louder now. "No, she planned this. You don't understand. He was part of it." "Mrs. Henderson," Judge Harlan warned, "you will remain silent." But Tara didn't stop, her voice pitched upward, ragged. "You think I did this alone? Ask him." She spun toward Eric, eyes wild. "You signed everything. You wanted the money just as much as I did." Eric flinched like she'd struck him again. "Tara, stop." "You coward!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger. "You think you get to stand there and play the good son now? You hid behind me every time, every damn time." The bailiff stepped forward, but the judge raised a hand. "Let her finish," she said quietly. Tara's chest heaved, her words disintegrating into gasps. "You did this to us," she whispered finally, voice breaking. "You did." And then, silence. The kind that leaves a ringing in your ears. Eric sat motionless. Then his head dropped into his hands. His voice came out rough, cracked. "I didn't mean for this." I turned just slightly, meeting his eyes across the aisle. For a second, we were the only 2 people in that room, the son who'd looked away and the mother who'd finally stopped forgiving it. "But you stood there," I said softly. His shoulders shook once, then again. The sound of it, his sob, sharp and stifled, was somehow smaller than I'd imagined it would be. Judge Harlan cleared her throat, restoring order with a single look. "Given the evidence presented," she said, "and the defendant's lack of prior convictions, the court sentences Ms. Henderson to 2 years probation, mandatory restitution of the full misappropriated amount, and a public written apology to Mrs. Sloan to be published in the local record." Tara's head dropped. Her lawyer whispered something, probably about appeals, but she wasn't listening. The judge continued, her tone softening just slightly. "Let this serve as reminder. Age does not grant permission to exploit, and trust is not currency to be spent." The gavel came down with a final echoing strike. It was over. Ava exhaled beside me, closing her folder with quiet precision. "You did it," she murmured. But I didn't feel victorious, just emptied. Tara was still crying when they let her out, Not graceful tears, but choking ones, raw and human. Eric rose halfway as she passed, then sank back down when she didn't look at him. I stood, smoothed my coat, and walked past them both. I didn't speak, didn't glance. I'd given enough of my life to their noise. Outside, the hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant and rain. Reporters were gone. Only the echo of footsteps followed me toward the exit. When I reached the courthouse doors, I paused, just long enough to feel the cold air hit my face, clean and sharp. For a moment, I thought I heard someone call my name, but when I turned, there was no one there. Only Eric's silhouette in the doorway behind me, frozen in place, watching. And in that stillness, a thought surfaced, quiet but certain. He wasn't done paying yet. By the end of the week, my name was in the paper, not buried in the classifieds, where I used to skim for estate sales and lost pets, but on the front page, right beneath a blurred still of the courtroom screen. Mother records daughter-in-law's assault. Wins case. The headline made it sound cleaner than it was. There was nothing clean about it. The story ran for 3 days straight. Radio talk shows chewing it like gristle. TV anchors saying words like elder justice and digital courage. I didn't recognize myself in any of it. The phone rang constantly. Reporters, neighbors, old friends who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly just checking in. I stopped answering. Ava handled what she could, politely, efficiently. But even she couldn't stop the mail that arrived daily. Letters from strangers, some grateful, some confessional. One from Oregon simply said, "I wish I'd had the courage to record mine." I read that one twice, then tucked it into the drawer with my mother's rosary. By Friday, Nina showed up at my door with coffee and a grin. "Well," she said, setting down the cups, "never thought my phone habit would make history." Her tone was light, but her eyes were searching. She'd seen the interviews, the headlines. She knew how much I hated attention. I smiled faintly. "You didn't film violence," I said. "You filmed truth." She leaned back against the counter, quiet for a moment. "Truth doesn't usually trend." "No," I said, "but maybe it should." For the first time in weeks, I let myself laugh. Small, real, and short-lived. Ava came later that afternoon, briefcase in hand, her heels muted against the worn kitchen tile. "Paperwork's ready," she said. "The house, the accounts. Everything's officially transferred back in your name." She set the stack of documents on the table, thick as a Bible. I looked at them for a long time before signing. It felt strange. Owning something that had always technically been mine, but had for so long felt stolen. When I finished, Ava placed a notarized seal on top. "You're clear," she said softly. "Completely." I nodded. "And Eric?" She hesitated. "He signed the quitclaim this morning, told his realtor he's moving out of state. North Carolina, I think. Didn't leave a forwarding address." For a moment, I felt the old ache stir, the kind only mothers know, the one that lives in the ribs like a ghost of love. But it passed quickly, replaced by something steadier. "Let him go," I said. Ava watched me a second longer as if she wanted to say something else, then simply nodded. "You did good, Margaret." After she left, the house felt cavernous. Every sound seemed to echo. The refrigerator hum, the tick of the wall clock, the soft pulse of wind under the eaves. I walked through each room slowly, running my hand along door frames, curtains, tabletops. Dust had settled on everything. Maybe that was all peace really was. Dust finally being allowed to settle. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the light change across the lawn. The leaves were gone now, just bare branches, swaying against a gray sky. For the first time in months, I didn't feel watched. Still, quiet had its own sharpness. I thought about Tara, about whether she'd actually write that apology herself or let her lawyer's intern do it. About Eric, somewhere on the interstate, heading south with the radio off and the past in his rear view. And I thought about myself, not as victim or victor, but as someone finally standing on solid ground again. When the kettle whistled low, I poured another cup and turned on the small TV above the counter. The local news anchor was wrapping up a segment on my case. Her voice softened on the last line. And though the Henderson family declined comment, sources confirm restitution payments will begin immediately. Mrs. Sloan has expressed no plans to pursue further action. I reached for the remote, but stopped when the next image appeared. Tara, leaving the courthouse. Her hair loose, eyes shielded by dark glasses. No handcuffs, no reporters close enough to touch her. Just a glimpse of her face before she stepped into a waiting car. She looked calm. Too calm. I turned off the TV, the room sinking back into stillness. Peace, I thought, finally. But as dusk fell, a single envelope slid through the mail slot. No return address, just my name in Eric's handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. The paper inside was thin. Only one line written across the center. You don't know everything. Winter came early that year, sharp and colorless. The kind of cold that makes sound travel too far, too clear. Months had passed since the trial, since the headlines stopped printing my name, since the last letter from the restitution office arrived. The house had gone quiet again. Not empty, just still. I'd started keeping the radio on low most days. Old jazz stations, nothing with lyrics. It helped drown the echo of things unsaid. That afternoon, a knock came at the door. 3 steady raps. Not the hesitant tap of a delivery man or the hurried rhythm of a neighbor. I froze halfway to the kitchen, heart kicking once against my ribs. When I opened the door, Eric stood there. He looked older. Maybe not in years, but in weight. His coat hung wrong, his face thin. Eyes that used to hold warmth now looked rinsed out, hollow. "Hi, Mom." His voice cracked on the second word. I didn't answer, just stepped aside, motioning him in. He hesitated before crossing the threshold like he wasn't sure he was still allowed. He took off his gloves, holding them in one hand like something fragile. "You look good," he said. I didn't. But I appreciated the lie. "You look tired," I said. He nodded, eyes dropping to the floor. "Been driving a lot." I gestured to the table. "Sit." He did, carefully, like the chair might reject him. For a long time, we just sat there. The clock on the wall ticked. The wind pressed against the windows. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't protect you." The words came out so quietly I almost missed them. He swallowed, jaw trembling. When she lied, when she forged those papers, I knew something was off. I just didn't want to see it. She said it was temporary, that it would make things easier. And I believed her. "You didn't just believe her," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "You chose her." He winced. A muscle in his cheek twitched. I know. I stared at him for a long time, the boy I'd raised, headstrong, bright, too trusting for his own good, was still somewhere behind those tired eyes. But the man sitting in front of me looked like he'd finally learned what trust could cost. "Can I fix it?" he asked. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to take the pain from his face and fold it into something smaller, something survivable. But there are some debts no one else can pay for you. I shook my head slowly. "Fix yourself first." He nodded, eyes wet but focused. Like he'd expected that answer, and came here anyway just to hear it out loud. We sat in silence again. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. No ribbon, just plain brown cardboard. He slid it across the table. "I found this in one of Tara's drawers after she left," he said. "It was broken when Dad died. I had it repaired." I hesitated before opening it. Inside, cushioned in soft felt, was my husband's old wristwatch. The gold casing had been polished, the glass replaced. When I lifted it, the ticking filled the space between us. Steady, alive, forgiving in a way I couldn't quite be yet. Eric cleared his throat. "He always said it was supposed to go to you." I didn't trust my voice. I just nodded, running a thumb along the smooth edge of the faceplate. The minute hand trembled forward. One tiny, perfect motion. When I finally looked up, Eric was standing. "I'll go," he said quietly. I could have stopped him. Could have asked him to stay for tea, for dinner, for one more hour of trying. But forgiveness is its own slow machinery. It doesn't move because you command it. So I just said, "Drive safe." He nodded once, eyes shining, then stepped out into the wind. When the door closed behind him, I stayed where I was, the box still open, the watch ticking in my palm. And for the first time since the trial, I cried. Quietly, completely. Outside, snow began to fall in thin, slanted lines, covering the porch in silence. Somewhere deep in the house, the clock struck 6. And beneath the sound of my own breathing, I could swear I heard another tick. Steady, rhythmic, like time itself had decided to start again. Spring came late. Hesitant as if afraid to disturb the quiet. The snow melted slow that year, retreating inch by inch until the earth began to breathe again. I spent most mornings in the kitchen with the window cracked, letting in the sound of birds that hadn't sung in months. That's where Ava found me one Tuesday, briefcase in hand and that half smile she only wore when something was about to change. "I thought we were done with paperwork," I said, pouring her coffee. "Almost," she said, sliding a thin folder across the table. "But this one you'll like." Inside were columns of numbers, figures that didn't make sense at first. When I reached the total, I looked up sharply. "This can't be right." "It is," Ava said. "The Restitution Review Board audited Tara's accounts. Turns out there were secondary holdings we didn't know about, joint investments, back pay interest, even liquidated property assets. After fees, your recovery exceeds the original loss by nearly 40%. I blinked at her. 40%? Ava nodded. It's poetic, really. She tried to take everything, and somehow, you ended up with more. For a long moment, I just stared at the numbers. They didn't feel real. Like money from a story I'd heard once. Not something with my name attached. "What am I supposed to do with it?" I asked quietly. Ava smiled, but there was weight behind it. "Whatever makes the pain make sense." That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after the house went dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. The folder lay open beside the repaired watch. I traced the edges of both, past and present, loss and return, 2 circles finally closing. By dawn, I knew what I wanted. The following week, I filed new papers, not for court, but for creation. A modest nonprofit, built from the same bones that had once carried my case. We called it the Dignity Project. Its mission was simple: provide free legal guidance for victims of elder fraud, intimidation, or abuse. I started in the church basement using a folding table and my old laptop. Word spread faster than I expected. By June, the first letters arrived, people asking for help, for advice, for a chance to be believed. Nina came on board before I even asked. "You'll need someone who knows how to talk to people," she said, dropping a clipboard onto my desk. "And someone who doesn't mind bad coffee." She was right on both counts. Within a month, she'd organized the outreach calls, printed flyers, and built a website I barely understood. Watching her work, I realized she'd found her own kind of justice too, the kind that doesn't come from a verdict but from doing something with what hurt you. Then one morning, Ava called. "You've got a new donor," she said. "We do?" "Anonymous. Substantial." "How substantial?" "Enough to keep the lights on for 3 years." I didn't need to ask who it was. I knew the handwriting on the envelope that arrived a few days later. The one addressed to the Dignity Project with no signature inside, just a cashier's check, and a note written in clean, deliberate pen strokes. For those who still have time to be better. I folded the note once and kept it in my ledger. Later that summer, a local reporter came to do a piece on our little operation. She was young, earnest, the kind of person who still believed every story could change something. She asked what made me start it. I thought for a moment, then said, "If pain must exist, let it pay rent." She laughed softly, wrote it down, and a week later it was in the headline, "Retired Teacher Turns Assault Case into Hope for Others." The words didn't sting this time. They felt accurate. We hosted our first legal clinic that same weekend. 15 people showed up. Some just wanted to talk. Some brought boxes of documents, their own small wars on paper. As I watched Nina explain intake forms to an elderly man with trembling hands, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Tara. Not at Eric. Not even at the silence that used to haunt the house. I was building something that outlived all of it. When I locked up that night, the air was cool and clean. The street lamps glowed like sentinels, and for a moment, I thought of my husband's watch ticking in the drawer at home. Time wasn't something I feared anymore. It was something I used. Still, as I reached my car, my phone buzzed. An email, no sender, no subject line, just one sentence on the screen. "The past doesn't stay buried, Margaret." By summer's edge, the house no longer looked like the one where everything had fallen apart. The old beige siding was gone, painted now in a soft, forgiving blue. New light poured through freshly cleaned windows, bright enough to reach corners that hadn't seen warmth in years. The porch railings gleamed with a second coat of white, and when the neighborhood kids rode their bikes past, their laughter carried through the open door like music. I'd never realized how sound could make a house feel young again. Inside, there were other changes. The framed newspaper article from the Herald, the one about the Dignity Project, hung modestly above the bookshelf, beside a picture of my husband, taken the summer before he died. The repaired watch sat below it on a small wooden stand, ticking steadily, like a promise kept. That afternoon, sunlight stretched through the kitchen, warm and clean, as Nina paced the living room, camera in hand. "Okay," she said, balancing her phone on a small tripod. "Smile if you can. If not, just look thoughtful. Thoughtful plays well on video." I laughed. "You're bossier than you used to be." "Occupational hazard," she said, grinning. She'd taken over the communications for the Dignity Project officially last month. The board, still just the three of us, Ava, Nina, and me, had decided to record a short video for our website launch. Nina wanted authenticity. I just wanted it to be over before the sun shifted. "Tell me about the clinic," she prompted, voice from behind the camera. I folded my hands in my lap. "We see people who've been told they don't matter," I said. "Who've been told they're too old, too confused, too powerless to fight back. We help them remember they're none of those things." Nina lowered the camera slightly, watching me instead of the screen. "You know," she said softly, "you could have just taken the settlement and disappeared." I met her eyes. "And do what? Garden until I forget?" A small smile touched her mouth. "You could have." "Maybe," I said, "but forgetting is just another kind of silence. And silence is what got me here in the first place." A doorbell rang somewhere down the hall. Ava stepped in, her usual calm framed by the sharp click of heels. She looked around approvingly. Well, this doesn't feel like the house of a woman who's survived a war. Feels better when you repaint the battlefield, I said. Ava laughed softly, setting a folder on the counter. You've come a long way, Margaret. You turned their cruelty into your legacy. I shook my head. No, I just refused to let it be the last word. She studied me for a moment, her lawyer's gaze softened by friendship. Still, you built something good out of something ugly. Most people can't. I thought about that for a second, then said quietly, because kindness without spine is just permission. Ava blinked, then smiled, slow and proud. Remind me never to cross you in a courtroom. Nina chuckled from behind the camera. Oh, that's going in the final cut. We spent the rest of the afternoon filming, laughter punctuating the serious bits, the sound of kids shouting from the street filtering through the open window. By the time we wrapped, golden light had spilled across the kitchen floor, turning everything the color of peace. After they left, I stood alone for a while, letting the quiet settle. Outside, the porch lights came on automatically. The Dignity Project sign, a simple brushed steel plaque mounted beside the front walk, caught the glow. Dignity is defense, it read, Ava's suggestion, etched clean into the metal. From the sidewalk, I could hear two women walking past. That's her house, one whispered. The teacher, the one who started that foundation. The other replied softly, good for her. Their voices faded, replaced by the cricket's slow rhythm and the hum of the distant highway. I leaned against the doorframe, the smell of paint and summer air mixing in a way that felt almost holy. For the first time, the house didn't carry ghosts. It carried purpose. I wasn't a victim, or a headline, or even a survivor. I was just a woman who had decided that the story wasn't finished. Still, as the night deepened, my phone lit up on the counter. One unread message. No name, no subject. Just a short video clip attached. The preview froze mid-frame. Tara's face. Smiling. The evening settled in slow, the way it does in early autumn. Light thinning by degrees, the air turning that clean kind of cool that smells faintly of rain and old leaves. I stood on the porch, the same porch where everything had come undone months ago. Where Tara had screamed, where the truth had first cracked open like a bone. Only now it felt different. Whole again. Mine again. The railing gleamed with fresh paint, smooth beneath my hand. The wind carried faint laughter from the house next door. Kids chasing each other through the yard, their voices bright and careless. It wasn't my family's laughter, but it was enough. I looked across the street at the mailbox, the one that had once been the drop point for restraining orders and summonses. Tonight, it just looked ordinary. Quiet. Inside, the kitchen light glowed warm through the window, spilling onto the porch floorboards. I could still smell the coffee Nina had made earlier when she'd stopped by to celebrate the video going live, the new promotional piece for the Dignity Project. She'd filmed it with her usual mix of patience and mischief, and now the world was watching. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated before checking it, not ready to break the stillness. When I did, the screen glowed with her message. Nina. 500,000 views already. A second bubble appeared. Nina. You're trending again, you know. I smiled faintly, thumb hovering over the keyboard before I typed back. Let them watch. The words made me laugh under my breath. Quiet. A little disbelieving. 6 months ago, being seen had terrified me. Now it felt like freedom. I slipped the phone back into my coat pocket and looked down at the object in my other hand. My husband's watch, its face newly polished, the band catching the last bit of light. The second hand ticked with that same patient rhythm that had always soothed me. Tick, tick, tick. Time, steady and forgiving, moving forward whether I was ready or not. I traced the watch's edge with my thumb, remembering the day Eric had brought it back to me. The look in his eyes, broken but clear. I didn't know where he was now, only that the last email from the foundation's accountant had confirmed another anonymous donation, enough to expand the clinic statewide. I hoped it was him. I hoped he was trying. Behind me, the screen door creaked softly in the wind. For a second, it almost sounded like footsteps, familiar ones, but I didn't turn. Some ghosts deserved their peace. The horizon was fading to gold and then to blue, the first stars pressing through. Across the lawn, the Dignity Project sign caught the porch light, its metal letters gleaming. Dignity is defense. Ava had called earlier too, just to tell me she was proud. You did what the law couldn't, she'd said. You made the story mean something. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had. But standing there, watching the evening settle over the neighborhood, I realized the story wasn't really mine anymore. It belonged to the people who would walk through the doors of that office next week, the ones who still trembled when they said their own names. For them, maybe, the story would start again. The air shifted, the faint scent of rain mixing with fresh paint and distant barbecue. The kind of scent that told you life had decided to keep going. I tilted my head back, feeling the night move around me. Let them watch, I murmured again, softer this time, like a benediction. Then I looked down at the watch in my palm, its hand steady, its face reflecting the porch light like fire caught behind glass. For a moment, I thought about everything that word nothing had meant when Tara spat it at me. Nothing left, nothing owed, nothing mine. But she'd been wrong, because somehow, through the noise and the shame and the silence that nearly swallowed me whole, I'd clawed my way back to something she could never steal. Truth. Peace. My name. The ticking grew louder, syncing with the rhythm of my breathing, until it was all I could hear. I looked out at the darkening street one last time and whispered, to the air, to myself, to whatever was still listening. She said I'd get nothing. A small smile. But I got everything that mattered. The camera would pull back here if there were one. The porch lights fading. The woman standing where the story began, steady against the wind. The watch in her hand still ticking, soft and certain, as the sky above her deepened into night.